The first knock came at 2:47 a.m. I remember because the power was out and I was holding a flashlight in my mouth, trying to relight the furnace pilot. The second knock came a few seconds later, slower but heavier, like the hand behind it had all the time in the world. I wasn't expecting any late check-ins. The pass was closed. Snowplows had stopped running hours ago. Whoever was out there had either made a very bad decision or was already past the point of no return. Let me know where you're listening from tonight and if you've ever worked somewhere that felt too quiet for comfort. And if these kinds of stories help you fall asleep, consider following so you don't miss the next one. My name's Dana Ellis. I was 37 when it happened. This was back in 2006 when I worked night desk at a lodge outside Silverton, about 200 feet up, just off a long stretch of US 550 we used to call the Death Road. Winters were harsh, but the work was steady. People came for the mountains, the silence, the feeling of being a little too far from cell service. I liked it out there. Even when the storms hit hard, it felt like the kind of place nobody could find you unless you wanted them to. That week, we were down to just 2 staff me at the front desk and Len Turner on overnight maintenance. The cook had gone back to Durango for a funeral. The housekeeper was out sick. It was just us and 6 empty rooms. By the second night, it was clear the incoming storm was going to shut down the pass completely. By midnight, the snow had gone from steady to biblical. Len had just finished salting the rear walkway when the radio crackled. He said he saw headlights cutting through the snow wall way out past the tree line. I told him it was probably a drift reflection or his own flashlight. But 5 minutes later, I heard the engine. Old, low, rumbling. The vehicle came to a stop just short of the south lot. I couldn't see the driver at first, just the silhouette of a man stepping out and walking straight toward the lobby doors. No gloves, no scarf, just a long brown coat and the slow, trudging gait of someone not trying to be anywhere fast. The power flickered again just before he stepped inside. He didn't speak right away, just looked around the lobby like he'd been here before. He was pale, not in the way people look after a drive, but something deeper, as if the cold didn't cling to him because it never left. Room, he said. One word. Flat, but not impolite. I told him we only had 6 units. 5 were empty. He slid a worn leather billfold across the counter with exact cash. 3 nights, no extras. No ID, just a printed slip from some other lodge in Utah with a checkout time circled 2:47 a.m. the same day. I should have asked more questions, but the snow outside was already covering the tire tracks. And something in his face, in the way he didn't blink, made me want to get him behind a door and away from the lobby. I gave him room 3. Len helped him carry his bag down the hall even though the man didn't ask. It was small, just a duffel barely enough for clothes. Len came back with a strange look on his face, said the guy hadn't spoken another word the whole walk down. When I asked if he'd gotten a name, Len just shook his head. Didn't seem like the kind of man who wanted one remembered. Around 2:47 a.m., we heard the first knock, not at the lobby door, not at room 3. It was on the supply door at the far end of the back hallway, a door nobody used in winter. It led out to where the plow parked in summer, and it hadn't been opened in weeks. I looked at the camera's static. Len was in the boiler room, but I radioed him. He didn't answer. I walked the hall alone. The supply door was shut, but frost was blooming on the metal frame like something had stood there for a while. When I touched it, the knob felt almost warm, like breath had been on the other side. I waited a few seconds. Nothing. No footprints. No sound. Just the echo of a knock I couldn't prove. I started back toward the lobby and past room 3. The quiet man was sitting on the bed, fully dressed, staring straight at the door, not moving, like he'd been waiting for someone to come knock, but not me. The next morning, his car was still out front, covered in a new foot of snow. I thought maybe he'd check out early. Most travelers don't stay long when the weather locks them in. But the second night came and he never left the room. Not for water, not for food, not even for the midnight coffee Len brewed every night in the back galley. When Len knocked to ask if he needed anything, there was no answer. But later, when I walked past, I could hear quiet breathing, not sleep breathing. Awake, still, listening. On the third night, the power went out again harder this time. No heat, no lights, Chi backup generator. Len was outside checking the main when the knocks returned. Not 1, not 2. 4 knocks, from 4 different sides of the building, all within 10 seconds of each other. North hallway, back laundry, storage closet, side exit. We have no staff rooms on those sides, no guests. Only room 3 had someone in it. I ran to check the monitors, more static. Every camera offline. Len came back inside with frost on his eyebrows and said the snow outside had stopped falling, completely dead air. Not a flake moving. That's when we heard the 5th knock. It came from inside, somewhere in the hallway near room 3. But when we turned the corner, there was no one there. Only room 3's door cracked an inch. And the key, the brass lodge key, with the old green tag lying in the middle of the hall like it had been dropped or left. We opened the door. Room 3 was empty. The bed untouched. No duffel bag, no boots by the door. Just a shallow print in the carpet, the kind that fades fast, and a slip of paper on the pillow. It was the same slip he'd paid with. The checkout time was still circled. 2:47 a.m. I never saw the man again. And 3 weeks later, Len stopped showing up to shifts. They found his truck parked off a snow road near Silverton Engine, off doors unlocked and the keys on the passenger seat. No footprints. Just the exact same slip of paper tucked under the wiper blade with a new time circled. 2:47 a.m. I don't usually talk about this. It's one of those memories that makes people tilt their head when you tell it, like they're trying to decide if you're messing with them or slowly unraveling. Back in 2013, I took a winter break job manning the night shift at a gas station out near mile 237 on the Dalton Highway. My uncle owned the place, though place is generous. It was mostly a prefab kiosk, 2 old pumps and a trailer out back where I'd sleep between shifts. Closest town was Coldfoot, and that was 2 hours away if the roads weren't frozen over, which they always were. There weren't many customers after dark, mostly truckers hauling freight or guys heading up to Prudhoe for work rotations. You learned to appreciate the silence, the buzz of the freezer lights, the low hum of the pump when it kicked in, and the wind, it never stopped, just changed direction. I'd been working there a few weeks when I noticed something strange. It was a Wednesday, just after 2 a.m. I remember because I was microwaving one of those burritos you regret halfway through. I glanced out the window and saw headlights through the snow curtain crawling up the access road. Nothing unusual. We got rigs in the middle of the night sometimes. But what pulled up wasn't a rig. It was a light blue Chevy pickup, old model, maybe 80s or early 90s, with a square grille and fog lights duct-taped in place. It rolled to a stop at pump 4 and just sat there. No engine noise, no door opening, no one stepped out. I waited a minute, then grabbed my coat and went out with the clipboard. You don't assume people want help out there. Most prefer to pump and leave. But it was policy. As I got closer, I noticed the windows were fogged except the driver's side. That one was crystal clear. And behind the glass was a man staring straight ahead, pale, expressionless, hands on the wheel, not moving. I tapped the window once. No reaction. Tapped again, louder. Still nothing. I leaned down to say something and realized the engine wasn't just quiet. It wasn't running at all. Before I could say anything, the headlights shut off. No flicker, just off. I took a step back. The man blinked once slowly, then reached forward and turned the ignition. The engine didn't start, but the dashboard lights came on just long enough for me to see the gas gauge was pointing to empty. Then everything went dark again. I turned and walked back to the kiosk, telling myself maybe he was just resting or trying to warm up with a battery-powered heater or something. People get weird when they're that far out alone in the cold. I watched the truck for another 10 minutes. It never moved. I finally stepped away to restock the mini fridge. When I looked out again, it was gone. No engine noise, no tail lights, just gone. No tire marks in the snow, even though I'd seen it parked there just minutes before. The next night was quiet. Thursday passed with nothing but snow and reruns of old sitcoms on the break room TV. But the following Wednesday at 2:03 a.m., I saw the headlights again. Same truck, same pump, same driver, same frozen stillness. I didn't go out this time, just stood behind the counter and watched. The man never moved, but the lights flicked off again after about 5 minutes, and when I finally opened the door to look, the truck was gone. I started keeping notes. Each week, Wednesday night, sometime between 2 and 2:15 a.m., the truck would appear. Always at pump 4. Never got out. Never pumped gas. Always gone by 2:30. After the 4th week, I went out during the day and checked the pump. Thought maybe it was some weird mechanical signal or false sensor. But it was just a standard tank. No tech weirdness. Nothing unusual. I told my uncle. He laughed and told me I'd finally met Hrix. Said the guy was a miner who used to drive that stretch back in the 90s, heading north to a drill site near the ridge. Story goes he stopped for gas one night, paid cash, then vanished between the pump and the register. Just poof. Never found. Truck was discovered 2 days later, abandoned 5 miles up, still running, doors locked. They said the only thing missing was the driver. Name was Walter Hrix. I thought my uncle was pulling my leg until I checked the old logbook we kept under the counter. Back then, attendants used to record pump activity by hand. And there it was. February 12, 1992. Pump 4, 14.3 gallons. Paid $12.60. Next entry, a note scribbled in red ink. He never came in. Truck still running. Reported to troopers. After that night, I started locking the door at 2:00 a.m. every Wednesday. Didn't matter. The truck came anyway. But then things started to change. The fifth week, the snow around Pump 4 was disturbed like someone had walked around the vehicle several times. Boot prints. But the pattern was wrong. Too even. Too measured. Like they'd been placed, not stepped. The sixth week, a second figure appeared. In the reflection. I swear I only saw it in the glass, not on the lot. Just the shape of something tall standing behind the driver. Not moving. No detail. Just a shadow where nothing should be. And on the seventh Wednesday, the window fogged from the outside. I stepped out once, stupid, I know, and when I looked, the passenger window had words written in the condensation. Just 5 letters smeared with a fingertip. Still. I don't know what it meant. Still here, still waiting, still empty. The truck disappeared 2 minutes later. I quit that job, the next spring moved back to Anchorage. I don't know if the truck still shows up, but sometimes if I wake up around 2 a.m. on a Wednesday and look out my apartment window, I'll swear I see a pale blue light on the street. Just for a second. I never go look. I've lived in Alaska most of my life, but I only ever went hunting once, and I never went back. It was the fall of 2014. I was 28 working warehouse dispatch in Anchorage, mostly forklifts and inventory tracking. It wasn't a bad job, just routine. My dad, Hank, was a retired bush pilot, a real backwoods guy, the kind of man who could clean a moose in the dark and make coffee over pine bark. He'd been on my case about getting outdoors more, about not letting the screen make me soft. So when he invited me out to the Copper River Basin for a father-son hunting trip, I said yes. I thought it would be good for us. We hadn't done much together since Mom passed, and I figured a weekend in a remote cabin might do something for the distance that had crept in. The place we stayed in wasn't really a cabin. It was a one-room shelter built by some trapping outfit back in the 80s. No insulation, just plywood walls, a rusted stove, and a small deck out front with a half-broken chair. We had to park the truck 3 miles away and hike in with gear on our backs. No cell service, no roads past a certain point, just thick spruce and black cottonwood and the smell of ice forming on still water. We arrived mid-morning on Friday, settled in, and spent the afternoon prepping the tree stand and scouting for tracks. It was cold but dry. Clouds moving slow, like they didn't want to commit to snow just yet. That first night we built a small fire outside and drank coffee from mismatched thermoses. Dad talked about old flying routes, about guys he'd lost touch with. It was good, quiet, no politics, no tension. But around midnight, I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. Not an animal. It was rhythmic. Something cracking slowly like bones or branches under deliberate pressure. I sat up and listened. The stove had gone out, so the cabin was dead silent. No wind, no night birds. Just that repeated distant cracking every 5 or 6 seconds. I woke Dad, and he listened too. He whispered tree rub, maybe, but his voice didn't sound sure. We heard one more snap much closer, then nothing. In the morning we found it. A rabbit, or what was left of one, skinned with precision, laid on a flat stone about 100 yards from the cabin. Its eyes were still intact, facing north like it had been posed. No signs of a predator kill, no blood spray, just absence. Dad muttered something and kicked dirt over it. Later that day, we went tracking deeper into the woods. We found caribou sign fresh scat hoof prints, but it didn't lead anywhere. just stopped in the middle of a gully like they'd vanished. That didn't make sense. Caribou don't just disappear. But we kept moving, circling around a ridgeline, watching for movement. Just before dusk, Dad tapped my shoulder and pointed downhill. An animal carcass, possibly a lynx, slumped near the edge of a clearing. We approached slowly. Its legs had been removed, not chewed, cut. Each stump was smooth, surgical. There was no sign of struggle, no fur torn nearby. And it was still warm. Dad didn't say a word, just looked at me, then looked at the trees. I asked if we should pack up and head back to the cabin. He nodded, and we didn't speak again until we were inside, door barred. That night I couldn't sleep. There was no wind, but I could hear something shifting in the brush behind the cabin. Not close, maybe 50 feet out. A slow, dragging rhythm. I held still, barely breathing, waiting for it to pass. But then I heard the deck creak, very gently, just once, like something testing the wood. I sat up. My flashlight was in my coat. I didn't move. Neither did Dad. He was lying still, eyes open, watching the stove. I don't think either of us wanted to know what was outside. Eventually, the creak came again, one step further, then nothing. At dawn, we opened the door. The deck was clear, but about 10 feet out in the frost-covered dirt were tracks, too large for any wolf, longer than a bear's stride. But they were wrong symmetrical. Each paw print had 5 narrow indentations like fingers, and they followed a curve around the cabin, never toward it. Just circling. Dad said nothing. He packed up quietly, loaded his rifle, and motioned for us to start back toward the truck. The woods felt quieter than the day before. No birds, no squirrels. Even the wind was still. We were halfway back when we saw the moose. Or what had been a moose. It was lying in the creek bed, intact but gutted. Its belly was opened clean and its organs were gone, not dragged, removed. We stood there for a long time. Dad finally said, "We're not the hunters out here." That last stretch back to the truck felt longer than the hike in. I kept checking the tree line, expecting to see something. But we never did, just shadows and silence. When we got to the truck, I noticed a smear on the rear quarter panel, like something had brushed against it. Dark streaks, not quite red, not quite brown. Dad scraped it with his boot. It smelled like wet metal. We didn't talk on the way home, just drove heater on low, radio off. Later that night, I looked up animal kill patterns. Nothing matched, not even close. Dad never went back to the basin, neither did I. We still see each other, still talk, but we don't bring it up. Not the skinned rabbit, not the prints, not the thing that circled us while we slept. Some places aren't meant for people. I don't usually talk about my field work anymore, not since 40 Mile. It was 2018, I was 30 and had just started my 3rd season as a research assistant on a wildlife telemetry team out of Fairbanks. We were tracking caribou, specifically a sub-herd that migrated along the Alaska-Yukon border. Our group rotated between 6 observation camps, setting up motion cameras, collecting scat samples, and maintaining GPS collars. We didn't get many surprises. The work was routine, seasonal. You got used to cold gear, flat batteries, satellite lag. The caribou moved like clockwork, and by the end of your 2nd year, you knew their rhythms better than your own. That fall, something changed. It started on a Monday. We were based out of a temporary trailer site about 10 miles east of the 40 Mile River. Just a small two-room setup with space for 4 cots, a fold-out table, and enough coffee to keep us from strangling each other during the long shifts. Lucas was our drone guy. He flagged the issue first, said 3 of our GPS collars had dropped signal within the same 2-hour window. No warning, no movement data, just gone. That was unusual, but not impossible. Sometimes the units froze or fell off. Then 3 more collars vanished, then 5. By Wednesday, we'd lost signal on 43 tagged caribou. I remember sitting in the trailer watching the live map as those green dots winked out one by one, like someone was plucking them off the screen. No ping, no motion trail. Just silence. Rennie, our team lead, said it was probably a terrain issue. "Could be river canyons," she muttered, tapping the screen like that would bring the dots back. "Or some kind of freak solar interference." She didn't sound convinced. We sent Lucas up with the drone that afternoon. His feed came through slow, patchy snow distortion, low cloud cover. But there was something else. At the edge of the last known cluster, right where the collars had gone dark, there was a stretch of clearing near the tree line. 7 shapes, humanoid, standing perfectly spaced apart in a line. At first, I thought they were hunters, maybe a snowmobiling group, but they weren't moving, not even a little, and they weren't wearing gear, just pale shapes standing upright in the middle of nowhere. Lucas tried to pan the drone closer, but the feed cut out completely. Not frozen, just black. When it came back, the shapes were gone. The clearing was empty. We thought maybe it had glitched, but Lucas was pale. "They weren't trees," he said, quietly. "They were people." That night I went out to check one of the motion-triggered camera traps near the river. It was about a mile from base, along a tree corridor that ran narrow and low. I'd done that walk a dozen times. It never felt long. But that night it felt like the trail kept shifting behind me, like the trees leaned closer once I passed. I kept turning, expecting to see someone backlit by the ridge, but the forest stayed empty. I reached the camera, pulled the card, and turned back, and that's when I saw the boots, sitting by the edge of the trail, neatly placed, laces tucked, no tracks around them. They were Rennie's. I recognized the patch stitching she'd done over the heel, but Rennie hadn't come out that night. When I got back to camp, she wasn't in her cot. Lucas said she'd stepped out around 7:30 to check the generator line. She hadn't come back. We searched until dawn. Nothing. No prints, no signs of a fall, no broken brush. The boots were the only trace. We reported her missing the next morning. Troopers couldn't get a chopper in until daylight. Karen, our team biologist, called the university and told them to shut down the project early. That afternoon, Lucas and I went back to the location where the collars dropped. The snow had started coming down harder, sticking in sheets to the brush. We kept our voices low, walking the last half-mile on foot. The drone hadn't flown well since the glitch, so we relied on thermal. When we reached the ridge, we launched the handheld unit and scanned the clearing. 7 figures again. Same place, same line. But this time, they moved. All at once, slowly together, they turned and began to walk away from the tree line. Not fast, not toward us, just deeper into the open, as if they'd been waiting for us to see them. Their heat signatures were off, not quite human. The shapes held together like people, but the readings were colder than they should have been. Almost room temperature. Then one of the collars pinged. Just for half a second, enough to flash a location. We followed it to the edge of a ravine near the riverbed. The snow there was strange, smooth, untouched, but the collar was there, half buried, no animal tracks, no fur, just the collar lying upright, its strap torn clean through. We hiked back in silence. Karen left camp the next day. Lucas and I stayed one more night to finish the data reports, but I didn't sleep. I kept looking at the monitor, watching for another caller to come back online. None did. 2 days later, search and rescue declared Rennie officially missing. They never found her. No signs of struggle, no evidence of animal attack, just her boots, just the trees. Just that strange clearing and the sense that we'd wandered into something no one was supposed to record. The university never published our findings. A month later, all 7 caller IDs were marked decommissioned, unknown. I still have a copy of the thermal footage. I don't watch it often, but sometimes when I do, I'll pause on the frame where the figures begin to move. And I swear, for a split second, one of them looks back. I've had all kinds of seasonal jobs since college: lifeguard, food runner, ski lift, operator. But the strangest one by far was the summer I worked the front desk at a lakeside lodge in the Eastern Sierra. It was a quiet, family-run place near June Lake. 10 cabins, a small spa, and an open bathhouse tucked into the woods about 100 yards from the main lodge. I was 24 that year. Took the job to save money for a cross-country trip I never ended up taking. We weren't fancy. Mostly hikers, couples, the occasional yoga group from the Bay Area. But the real appeal was the bathhouse, a natural hot spring that had been shaped into a circular pool with cedar benches and stonework. People booked just to soak there. Even locals used it late at night after hours, when we'd unofficially leave the gate open. The summer started normal enough, but in late July we had a group of 3 check in who made everyone uncomfortable from the jump. 2 men and a woman. The reservation was under Troy Ellison, tall guy, probably early 30s, wore mirrored sunglasses even indoors. The others were listed as guests David Kessler and Amanda Briggs. I remember because they only booked 1 cabin, and the vibes between them were off. Amanda barely spoke, always looked like she was somewhere else. David was louder, pushier, the kind of guy who tried to flirt with every woman on staff and complained if his towels weren't folded right. Troy kept to himself, mostly, except when he didn't. Sometimes he'd stare too long. Sometimes you'd walk past their porch and hear arguments, not loud enough to call the police, but enough to make you walk faster. On their 3rd night, Troy went to the bathhouse alone around 9 p.m. That part's normal. We leave laminated signs guests can hang on the door so others don't walk in. He signed it out, took a towel, and walked up the trail. That was the last time anyone saw him. The next morning, the cleaning crew noticed the sign still hanging. That wasn't unheard of sometimes. Guests forgot to bring it back, but the key was also still out, and no one had seen Troy since. I was at the front desk when Amanda came in asking if he'd left early. She looked shaken, said he hadn't come back to the cabin. David, who had been drinking iced coffee on the porch, suddenly stood up and said, "He probably hooked up with someone and left." The way he said it felt off, like a line he'd practiced. We walked to the bathhouse together. It was empty. The water was still warm. No towels, no clothes, no phone. Just the laminated sign on the door still swinging. That's when we called the sheriff. They searched the entire property, brought in dogs, even walked the woods behind the bathhouse. Nothing. No trail. No signs of a fall. No sign Troy had ever made it into the water. Amanda cried during the interview. David didn't. What came next is why I don't talk about this. The day after the search, our night manager went to unlock the storage room near the bathhouse where we kept extra candles and cleaning supplies. Inside, he found a bloody towel tucked behind the mop sink. The stain was old, brown, but it hadn't been there 2 days earlier. I helped with that room. I knew. Deputies took it in, asked more questions. Amanda broke down, told them Troy and David had fought not that night, but before, a couple days earlier. Said David accused Troy of trying something with her. She said she'd seen Troy leave for the bathhouse and that David left a few minutes later. She hadn't seen either since, but when she woke up, David was back in bed. They arrested David that afternoon. The sheriff never released the full statement, but rumor is he confessed, said it was an accident. Said Troy slipped, hit his head on the bench, said he panicked. But that doesn't explain what happened next. 2 weeks later, a couple staying in cabin 7 asked to move. They said they heard dripping in the middle of the night, said it wasn't from the bathroom, it was coming from under the floorboards. Maintenance went to check. The bathhouse sits on stone, but the cabins are up on concrete piers. We didn't think much of it until the plumber opened the crawl space and found a ring wedged near the drain pipe. It was bent, damaged, and caked with dark residue. Amanda identified it as Troy's. That was the last thing we ever found. No body, no confession that explained the missing time, no answers about how the ring got there. Just silence. David was sentenced, but not for murder, just tampering with evidence and obstruction. He got a reduced sentence. Amanda disappeared after the trial. Never answered calls. The phone number she gave was disconnected a year later. Every once in a while, I check the lodge's reviews. They're still open. Someone left a comment last year that made my stomach twist. It was short, 2 lines. Great place, clean bathhouse. I saw someone walk the path at 2:40 a.m., but no one ever came back down. I used to work overnight security at a tiny regional airport out in Nevada Quartz Hills, if you've ever driven through the back roads between Tonopah and the Utah line. It wasn't even big enough for TSA. We had 2 gates, no jetways, and half the time the baggage claim belt didn't work. The commercial flights came in during the day, mostly little regional hops. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended just after sunrise 5 nights a week. I was 29 back then, still figuring things out. Honestly, the job was quiet. Dead quiet. Mostly badge checks, perimeter walks, and making sure the vending machines didn't jam. Sometimes a medevac would land, but even those were rare. The airport felt like a forgotten limb. The kind of place that still used laminated key cards and radios that crackled when you walked past the metal detectors. We had 4 cameras total. Only 2 worked well. The weird part started on a Wednesday mid-July. The kind of night where the air hums like it's holding something in. Leo, the maintenance guy, had clocked out early, and I was alone. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I noticed something strange on the far end of the concourse. Gate 6. It was unlocked. Now Gate 6 hadn't been used in over 2 years. Budget cuts had sealed it off, and the lock on the door had rusted so badly that Leo once joked it would take bolt cutters to open it. but the red light above the access reader was blinking green. At first, I thought maybe Leo forgot to disable something. I walked down radio, clipped to my collar, and the closer I got, the colder it felt. Not AC cold, I mean that odd, sharp stillness like when your ears pop before a storm. The gate was cracked open, maybe 3 inches, enough for air to slip through, enough to hear something that didn't belong. I swear I heard a voice, just one word, repeated softly, over and over. It sounded like clear, or maybe near. I couldn't tell. I called Leo, half hoping it was just some stupid prank or a maintenance error. He didn't pick up, so I radioed dispatch just to log it and then pushed the door fully open. The jet bridge was gone. Just a black drop to the tarmac lit faintly by one flickering pole light. But what got me wasn't the door. It was the seat inside the terminal, the one directly across from the gate. Someone was sitting in it, facing the window. Still, upright, hands on their knees like they were waiting for a flight that never came. I said, "Sir, no answer." I stepped forward and realized the man was barefoot. His shoes were placed neatly beside him. No bag, no boarding pass. Just a man in dark slacks and a collared shirt, sitting so still it looked like he wasn't breathing. I backed away and called for local law enforcement. I didn't touch him, didn't ask questions. Just stood at a distance and waited for the cruiser to show up. When Officer Branham arrived, we both approached together. I let her take the lead. She said, "Excuse me, sir," and reached gently toward his shoulder. But the man was ice cold. Not just cold, frozen stiff. His eyes were open, glassy. His body tilted only when she touched it like a mannequin pushed off balance. He was dead. No ID, no wallet, no keys. The soles of his feet were clean like he hadn't walked in from anywhere. But there were no prints either, not inside the terminal, not near the door, not outside. We reviewed the cameras the next day. Nothing. The hallway cam near Gate 6 showed static between 2:16 and 2:49 a.m. The others showed no entry, no exit, no disturbance. Leo swore up and down he hadn't touched that door in months. The coroner never released a full cause of death, at least not to me. But rumors said the man had no obvious injuries, no drugs, no signs of exposure. Just frozen, like he'd been caught in place. I worked 3 more shifts before I quit. The last night I was there, something even stranger happened. At 2:43 a.m., the lights above Gate 6 came on by themselves. Just those. The rest of the concourse stayed dark. And on the radio, the one clipped to my collar, I heard it again. Not static, not crosstalk. Just one word. Whispered, clear, like someone was checking off a list. I spent most of my early 40s on the road, driving state to inspect claims for a small insurance firm. Kentucky was my territory that year. Endless back roads and old motels that hadn't changed since the 70s. Ashford was one of those towns. A faded exit off I-64, where the gas station still had rotary pumps and the diner closed before dark. I got in late, maybe close to midnight, and the only place with a vacancy was a 2-story motor lodge with peeling green paint. The sign out front buzzed faintly, half the letters burned out so that it read MOEL. The clerk looked surprised to see me. He handed over a brass key on a ring and said, "Try not to mind the noise." I didn't ask what he meant. I'd been driving 9 hours and just wanted a bed. Room 14 was mine second floor end of the row. The hallway carpet was thin enough to see the wood seams beneath. The air smelled faintly of bleach, though it didn't cover the stale scent underneath. I noticed it right away. Room 12, 2 doors down, had its light on. Curtains drawn tight, but the yellow glow pressed through the cracks. And someone was standing behind them. I saw the outline of a woman perfectly still, as though waiting for something. I tried not to stare. People have their lives. Maybe she'd been waiting for a ride. Maybe she didn't want company. I locked my door, dropped my bag, and stretched out on the bed. The air conditioner clanked every few minutes, rattling like loose change in a tin. Sometime after 1, I heard it. A knock. Not at my door, at hers. Room 12. Slow. Steady. 3 raps, then silence. The pause stretched long enough to make me think whoever it was had left. But then the door creaked open. I held my breath. I couldn't see the hall from my bed, but I heard the faint scrape of wood as though something heavy brushed across the floor. Then the sound of a door clicking shut. Morning didn't make it better. When I left for coffee, room 12's door was ajar. Just a crack. The curtains still drawn, the same yellow glow spilling through. I glanced inside. The room was empty. No bedspread, no suitcase, no woman. Just a single chair facing the drawn curtains. I went down to the clerk, unsettled, and asked who was staying in 12. He frowned. Nobody's in 12. Hasn't been for years. I didn't press, just thanked him and left. But as I loaded my car, I looked up. Second floor, 2 doors down. Room 12's curtain moved. Not much, just a small parting enough for someone to stand there and watch. The same silhouette as before. A woman still as stone. I drove away and never stopped in Ashford again. That was the last one I'll share tonight. Thinking back, I realize none of these places were extraordinary. Gas stations, highways, motels, forgotten corners of America you pass through without a second thought. But those are the places that stay with me. It isn't the landmarks or the big cities that settle deep in your memory. It's the flicker of a hallway light, the sound of a knock at the wrong door, the figure in a window that should be empty. Sometimes I wonder if the unease we feel in those moments is our own mind turning shadows into shapes. But sometimes I think it's the opposite, that maybe those places are already filled and it's us who don't belong. If you've listened all the way through, thank you. These stories linger because they remind me of how fragile the line is between safe and unsafe, known and unknown. Be careful on the road, and good night. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you'd like to hear more stories like these, please follow the channel, share this with someone who enjoys late-night listening, and subscribe so you don't miss the next collection. And tell me, have you ever passed through a place that felt wrong for reasons you couldn't explain?